You might not think that a few simple words could make you crave McDonald's breakfast sandwiches. But if you listen closely to the sound of me saying McGriddles, McMuffin, you might be wrong. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net. Christopher Media, let's make some noise. Welcome to Beer Nuts, a weekly excursion into the world of craft beer. Brought to you by MichiganBeerGuide.com. And now, here are the Beer Nuts.
All right, post-Thanksgiving, episode number 11. I'm Chris, with me from MichiganBeerGuide.com, JR.
Yo!
Uncle Pete.
What's up, everybody?
All right, Dugout.
Greetings.
Okay, so, this episode, what are we doing, JR?
We're going to do American Pale Ales this week. We were going to do Pale Ales, but we couldn't find very many English Pale Ales, and American Pale Ales are much more interesting. With all due respect and apologies to our British friends from across the pond, but we're going with American Pale Ales.
All right.
So we always start the show with a quote, but before we do that, we just want to reiterate to everybody, we're just a bunch of regular guys that enjoy quality, good beers, and we're trying to spread the gospel of better beers. So for everybody listening, hopefully you're in a position where you're able to open a beer with us. So crack one open and let's kick back and have a good time next hour. So Uncle Pete, you're attending. What's the first selection this week? Will be
Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, John.
and it wouldn't be just right and just if we didn't start American Pale Ales with one of the iconic, legendary, longtime favorite Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, who pretty much started this category and continues to be the benchmark. That being said, it's time for our beer quote of the week. We got some relevant music there, Chris.
Sure do.
Love that song. This week's beer quote of the week is: an intelligent man is sometimes forced to be drunk to spend time with his fools. That's by Ernest Hemingway from For Whom the Bell Tolls. Just the song. Let's just kick back and hear that.
It's like one of the first songs every guitar player ever learns.
Well, and as a long-suffering Philadelphia Phillies fan,
Oh,
our ex-closer Jonathan Papelbon, if there's any redeeming quality to him, that is his song, or was his song when he was a Philadelphia Philly.
hey, speaking of Philadelphia, want to talk about the Thanksgiving game? Or?
Yeah, I was there for. Not only that, I stayed until the final gun sounded.
Ooh.
Set a good example for my son that you don't leave early. So, but you know what? We took one on the chin, but I still bleed green. And a big win for the Lions fans. So as a Michigander, that wasn't all bad.
I can't believe
good for beer sales. I know that.
It keeps us in the playoff picture. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, that could be, what a story that could be, starting, 0-6, 0 forever, and then now they're looking like world beaters. So, well, we will pose a toast to all the Detroit Lions fans. Great win this week, and hey, you never know. Somebody's got to win it, right?
Yeah,
You're back in the hunt.
I've been a Lions fan far too long. I'm not toasting that.
That's one thing
Go Bears.
Fans have in common. Long droughts with no championships. So I guess, Dugout, as a Bears fan, you're the one guy here that actually has a ring. The rest of
All
us
the way
have no
back to
idea,
85.
It's 30 years old, but he's got one.
So, getting back to the business at hand, we are going through the American Pale Ale category. I'm going to take this first sip of the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. It's got a very pleasant aroma. It's hoppy, but it's not hoppy like an IPA. It's much more subtle. It has the hop flavor again. It's basically like an IPA, only not nearly as sharp. Which is what it's supposed to be. It's not as hoppy. It's not as strong, and it's just more milder and more drinkable. I would say that's a great word to describe an American Pale Ale, is a drinkable hoppy beer.
I would agree with that.
So I am going to go through the review process again. We are trying to bring Chris along. The appearance of this beer, it's clear, it's light gold, slightly golden, just very light. Opaque, you can see right through it. A lot of bubbles of carbonation, solid head. And then moving on to the smell, I get some hops, but they're not jumping out at me like a hoppy, strong IPA would. Just a little bit of A little bit of floral hops, probably Cascade, I'm guessing. Taste, again, it's very drinkable. It doesn't blow you away. So Chris, I know that you're not usually a fan of something overly hoppy. I think this is probably palatable to somebody like you.
It is. It is quite more mellow than an IPA to my palate.
So for somebody that doesn't care for hops or hoppy beer or bitter beers, this is a really good starter beer for somebody to get into the more hoppy stuff, because it's got those elements, but it's just very subtle compared to the ones that blow you away with hop bitterness. But so very drinkable, enjoyable, mouthfeel. It's light to medium body. It's somewhere between the mouthfeel of like a lager, or like a Budweiser or a Miller, but much more flavorful, obviously, and slightly carbonated. So I'd say light to moderate carbonation as well. So light to moderate is probably two characteristics that you would describe a pale ale. So overall, again, it is a light to moderate, very drinkable, very approachable. Somebody that maybe is new to craft beer or normally drinks, adjunct lagers could probably be introduced to this and find it very drinkable and not something that they would be, oh, that's a flower beer. It's very easy to drink and flavorful. So Sierra Nevada, I think, probably blazed the trail for this entire category. They've been around 20, 30 years. One of the first pale ales that I can remember ever tasting. And it was enjoyable then, and it's very enjoyable now. So I'd like to pass around. Chris, I'll start with you. What are your comments on this beer?
Like I said, much more drinkable than whenever I see, pale ale. I can 50-50 either way. And I agree with you. It's very drinkable. I get the flower and the aroma, which I associate with hops. It goes down well. I'm enjoying this one, actually.
Great. How about you, Pete?
Well, I would love to jump in on this one because I basically cut my craft beer teeth on this beer. 1984, I graduated from college. I went straight to Northern California, and I lived there for about 13 years. And I left the college days of Blatz and Old Style and Old Milwaukee and all those busy yellow beers. And first thing I had when I got to Northern California was a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. And I haven't turned back since. So it's a great, smooth, not harsh pale ale. It's a 5.6% alcohol, 38 IBUs or bitterness units. So it's not really up there that high on the bitterness, but it's very drinkable. And on the website here, it says that they use Magnum and Pearl hops for bittering and Cascade for finishing or the aroma. So it's one of my favorites. I always go to this beer. Will always love this beer. It's very good.
No doubt.
Well, much like Pete, I go way back with this beer, cutting my craft beer teeth on it as well. And so it's a staple in the craft beer world. It's I think it's extremely drinkable. It was my introduction to the Cascade hops, which are sort of known to have a very grapefruit type of flavor to them and a finish. And this is the epitome of the craft beer style. Is right here in this bottle.
Yeah, and I think you'll find Sierra Nevada, they'll, if they don't, they should, but I'm sure they'll claim that they're one of the early pioneers in this scene. Back in those days, when I first got there, I recall going to the California State Fair and helping my brother, who was working the judging for the beers at the State Fair. And I was just tallying up the score sheets. And after the fest, all of the beer trucks were out back, and Sierra Nevada was back there. And we just walked up with our kegs and jugs, whatever we had on hand. And it's like, can we have some? And they just passed it out for free. It was like being in heaven. I moved to California, and I was getting free Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Awesome.
Well, I feel bad I couldn't share like you guys did with this one.
Well, that's okay.
A lot of history tied to this for you guys, apparently.
Remember, what everyone said is it was one of our first craft beers that we really enjoyed and cut our teeth on it, so to speak. So I would say that maybe that's what you're doing right now, and that's perfect. So, again, one of the iconic, when you think pale ale, the first one came to mind for me that had to be on this list would be Sierra Nevada, and I think we all agree and we all enjoy it. So we're going to move on to our next selection, and Uncle Pete is going to go over this, and he's also going to cover the style guidelines for American Pale Ale. Bear with us. I know some of this gets a little technical, but some of us homebrew. And these are, it's useful information to teach you what makes this category different than the others. Pete is pouring us a Dale's Pale Ale from Colorado, I believe.
Yeah, Oscar Blues Brewing in Longmont, Colorado, right up there in beautiful central Colorado there by the Great Rocky Mountains. And comes in a can, actually. And this I'm anxious to try, John. And it should be fairly comparable, I would think, to the Sierra Nevada, but let's take a taste. Looking at the color, I think it's a little darker golden color than the Sierra Nevada was. It does make me want to drink it. It has a little bit of a taller head on it that's lasting a little longer than the Sierra Nevada had. I get much more floral hoppiness on the aroma. Very nice fresh hop aroma on this one. And for the flavor, definitely fresh hop flavor right up front. A little piney, not very strong. It does have 65 IBU, which is about double the Sierra Nevada. And it's a 6.5% alcohol by volume. So a little bit stronger on the alcohol and about double the hop bitterness. So it did show through on the flavor and the aroma. Mouthfeel, it's about, again, a medium light to a medium body. Carbonation is very well done. It's much higher than the Sierra Nevada we just had. But a smooth finish and not harsh. And it does have a lasting bitterness in my mouth. Doug, how about you?
Well, I get a sort of a slight metallic nose to it. I mean, a good amount of hop bite. It doesn't hang on long, so it dissipates fairly quick. But you can also taste a good amount of the malt that's in here. I think it's got a really good balance to it.
Chris, what are you thinking?
I smell pineapple. Am I the only one? Or is that the metallic?
I would say pine. I don't know about pineapple, but
Yeah, it's kind of...
I haven't tasted it yet.
Yeah, Chris, I'm really anxious to see I'm anxious to see if this is like too hoppy for you. But I don't want to skew your opinion, because this is kind of like it's a step up from the last one, but it's not really an IPA.
This one seems to bite at the beginning and then mellows out at the end. So, I don't hate it. I wouldn't give this can away. I would finish this, possibly order another one. Yeah, it comes on strong and then it kind of mellows out. At least
so it's kind of like you're getting towards the IPA hoppiness. It's probably a higher IBU. What's the IBU on this?
It's 65, JR.
Yeah, see.
It's about double the Sierra Nevada.
Yep. Okay, that's fair enough. My first experience with this beer is when I lived in Las Vegas. I had a trip to Denver, and we attended a Colorado Rockies game when I worked for Scottish in Newcastle. And our local rep out that way introduced me to Dale's because they had it at the game and they didn't have Newcastle. So I wanted to drink something flavorful, and amongst all the fizzy yellow beers, this was kind of a very welcome find. So it was very enjoyable during the Rockies game out at the ballpark. So I immediately fell in love with it, and I used to actually, whenever I'd go out on my market and they had Dale's for sale in Colorado, I would always bring some back with me. I kind of liked it was in the can, too, because now there's a lot of craft beers in cans, but this one was one of the ones that blazed the trail with cans. And actually, if you go to their brewery, they also have a brewery in North Carolina now, in Asheville. They have what's called crowlers there. Most breweries have beer to go in crowlers, which is a glass container or glass jug. Well, crowlers are relatively new on the scene, but they actually can. You can get most of them have about I think a 24 ounce is the standard size.
Right.
And they actually fill the can and then seal the can right in front of you, and then you have a can that you can take with you that probably lasts a little bit longer than that glass jug does.
Interesting.
So that's kind of cool.
One of the interesting news notes about Oscar Blues recently, when they had the torrential rains here back in October down in South Carolina, there was a lot of flooding. Yeah. They actually canned water, drinking water, and sent it down there for disaster relief. So kudos to Oscar Blues for jumping in and helping out.
That's a great story. That's what craft beer world's about, helping others, and it's a very friendly culture, and really glad to hear that, Pete. I didn't hear that story, but that just sounds like brewery helping out, sending probably a truckload of canned drinking water to those areas that were affected that needed the supply of drinking water to get through some tough times.
I mean, if it was me down there, I'd be saying, well, why not send the canned beer? But
well, I would imagine that they got a spike in sales from that. I'm sure those folks down there appreciated the gesture and
goodwill.
Well, good stuff. So, Pete, would you like to cover the style guidelines for us?
Sure. Let's go through a few of the guidelines here from the BJCP American Pale Ale guidelines. So you probably heard some of this as we talked about the first two beers we tasted. In the aroma should be moderate to strong hop aroma from either American or New World hop varieties, and with a wide range of characteristics, including things like citrus, floral, pine, resinous, spicy, tropical fruit, stone fruit, berry, or melon. If they added dry hops or dry hopped beer, it might add grassy notes, and dry hop versions might be slightly hazy, but I don't think we had in the first two beers, neither of those were dry hopped. Neither one was hazy, that's for sure. On the appearance, should be pale golden to a light amber. Should have a large white to off-white head with good head retention, and is generally quite clear, although dry hop versions could be hazy, as we mentioned. And then on the flavor, moderate to high hop flavor. Again, citrusy, floral, piney, spicy, resinous, stone fruit, berries, melons. And then a low to moderate, clean but grainy malt character supports the hop presentation. So as we heard Dugout talk about Dale's Pale Ale, the second beer, had a nice balance of malt and hops. The mouthfeel should be medium light to medium body, with moderate to high carbonation, with an overall smooth finish without astringency and harshness. Overall, it should be a pale, refreshing, hoppy ale, but yet sufficient supporting malt to make the beer balanced and drinkable. The clean hop presence can reflect classic or modern hops. Average strength, hop forward, pale American craft beer, generally balanced to be more accessible than modern American IPAs. So again, not quite a pale ale style, but something more smoother, less harsh, and more drinkable. A little bit of history on American Pale Ale. It's a modern American craft beer adaptation of the English Pale Ale, reflecting indigenous ingredients, hops, malt, yeast, and water, of course. And prior to the explosion in popularity of IPAs, the traditionally and most well-known and popular American craft beers, characteristic ingredients include pale ale, typically North American two-row barley, American or New World hops, could be American or English ale yeast, that gives it a neutral or lightly fruity characteristic. And specialty grains may add character and complexity. We could compare styles. They're typically lighter in color, cleaner in fermentation products, and have less caramel flavors than their English counterparts. They're less bitter in the balance and alcohol strength than the American IPA. Usually around 4.5 to 6.5 or 6.2 alcohol and roughly 30 to 50 bitterness units. So some commercial examples besides the two we've already had include Firestone Walker Pale 31, Great Lakes Burning River, of course Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, Stone Pale Ale, and Trogs Pale. So with that, we'll move on to tasting our next one with the Dugout.
Well, we got Goose Island 312 Urban Pale Ale. And if I can just get some in my glass here. First thing I'll notice is the color. It's very gold, much lighter in color than the previous two we've had. Pours with a nice head that dissipates slowly. Some lacing in the glass. And the first sip I get, the smell, I have, slightly hoppy, slightly floral. And then for the taste, I get sort of a little bit of a hop and a little bit of a malt. It's much less than the ones we've been having here as far as the presence of both of those ingredients. And the mouthfeel is fairly thin. I mean, there is a bit of a bite towards the end. Overall, I just don't think it stands up very well against the first two we've had, but that's just my opinion. It's a much lighter beer. Reminds me more of a fizzy beer.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit more like fruity characteristics that weren't. The first two were more hoppy. Sierra Nevada much more subtle than the Dales was hoppy. This is like a more fruity, like a citrusy fruit.
Yeah, I get some fruits in there too. It's a real lawnmower beer. I mean, it's an upgrade from a fizzy yellow beer, but it's on the lighter side for a pale ale.
And actually a little bit of sweetness to it. So I can see how it could be a starter beer as well, but I agree with Dugout. I don't think this stands up to the other two. Compared to the other two, this would be my third most favorite out of the three. How about you, Chris?
Well, my first reaction, maybe it was just from what we started out with, but this one is where'd the flavor go? It seems like this one is lacking in. It's supposed to be the same type of ale, I'm guessing, and it does not taste the same as it just tastes real. Like it tastes like it would be like the commercial example of, I guess, what we just tasted, like the mass bread. I think what Uncle Pete was saying about a lawnmower beer.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what I'm picking up here. Is this? Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's sweeter because I think it's maltier. There's not nearly as many hops in it.
I don't, like, compared with what I just had, like, not impressed.
Well, the Goose Island gives it 30 bitterness units, 5.4% alcohol by volume. Hops used are Amarillo, Mountain Hood, and Nugget with 2-row malt and Crystal 60 malt. So definitely on the lighter side from a color. Interesting combination of hops. I do get a different bitterness from this than I did from the first two. But again, much on the lighter side, the maltier side. Yeah, it's a good lawnmower beer. On a hot day, I'd put down a few of these in between the biggers.
Yeah, probably very profitable from them because there just doesn't seem to be. They probably don't use as many hops or as many ingredients. And as Pete mentioned, it's 30 IBUs, which is the bare minimum for the style guidelines. So it is what it is. Any other comments?
Well, I think even though it's a very low on the hops, it seems to be quite low on the malt as well.
Remember when I had my first beer?
Well, I guess the reason I thought it was malty is just because there's such a lack of hops that I tasted a little bit of malt sweetness. But it's just because there's so little there. There's so little there in all arenas. There's just not much there. It's like you said, lawnmower. I'm not very impressed. So we try a lot of good beers on the shows, and it doesn't mean it's not good. It's just not nearly as flavorful as I would hope when I invest my hard-earned beer money into a six-pack of it.
Yeah. I have zero complaints about this beer, but, I would drink several of them if I had them on hand and without feeling full or, overwhelmed. It's a good beer, I think.
Too, we haven't had yet what you gentlemen seem to refer to as a drain pour. We haven't had one of those yet. We've gotten close. Remember that was that pecan beer.
That was pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think Pete pointed out there's nothing wrong with this beer. That just it leaves me lacking. Like, is this all there is? So it's not bad. It's just not that good. That's my opinion. Generally, unless something's really repulsive. I mean, remember we always want to be respectful to brewers because the brewer that developed this recipe probably developed it for a certain type of drinker, and it might not be people with palates like the beer nuts. So to the masses, this might be another good step up from an adjunct lager into the next realm of flavorful beers. So I think we've said all we're going to say on that. So we did want to, again, go over in detail the assessment rating method that we use to rate beers. We wanted to go over that with you, Chris. So the next beer we're going to taste, we're going to go through each of the categories in detail and then get your opinions based on the parameters that we're supposed to use when we rate a beer. So let's see. I think we're going to go with Mirror Pond next from Deschutes. Pete's going to pour it for me, and I will walk you through. What I would like you to do is take your glass, pour it in, and we'll start with appearance before we even taste it. Let's just go in order. And we can all talk about this beer at the end of the review process, because this segment will be more about the review process, and then at the very end we can all comment on the beer itself and the brewery. Before I taste this, Chris, we're going to go look at appearance, and we're going to describe the beer's color, clarity, head retention, and lacing. Examples of descriptors for this category would be pale, golden, amber, ruby, brown, or black, clear, hazy, cloudy, or turbid, lackluster, lively, inviting, foamy, or creamy. And then for some pro tips, often thought to be unimportant, appearance sets expectation is as frequently a sign of good or bad things to come. So the appearance are usually a hint of what you're about to experience. And to properly assess the appearance, you should pour the beer into a clean glass and raise it to eye level for better viewing. Now, beer clean glass is important. You really always want to have a glass that's been rinsed with cold water first to remove any soap or bacteria, anything that might be on that glass. So always rinse it with cold water before you pour. So that's the appearance. So Chris, I'd like you to describe the appearance. You've got a few descriptors in the examples: pale, golden, amber, ruby, brown, black. What are you thinking?
Definitely somewhere in the amber category here, as far as the color. The head seemed to dissipate rather quickly. What is lacing? That's the question I have.
Okay, I want you to tilt your glass and then untilt it.
As it trails down.
You see the white foam? If there is no lacing, there will be no white foam. And if there is a lot of lacing, the white foam will stick to the side and not pour back down. Like if you get a really lacy beer, you can see at the end of your beer, you'll see lacing all up and down the glass from each sip you took.
So I guess this
If
is
there's no lacing, it'll just be nothing there.
like moderately lacing, I guess.
Okay, yep, fair enough. My glass, actually, it laces really good, and then it all settles back down. It doesn't stick to the glass, but it could be the type of glass I'm using, too. So, again, it's frequently a sign of good or bad things to come. What do you think about the appearance? I mean, I agree with you, amber. I would say between golden and amber, it is clear, not hazy. I don't know if it's lackluster. It's not lively either, so it's somewhere in the middle. It's just, there's adequate carbonation. So that's where we're at. Just one last question, Chris. So based on what you see so far, what do you think you're going to experience with the overall enjoyment of this beer? Is this a good hint, or does it look like, I don't know if I'm going to like this?
This looks like it could go either way from what I've learned on this show.
Middle of the road, okay?
Yeah, this looks like it could be hoppy, it could not be. It could be, one of the things I've learned too is it not always tastes like it looks, and vice versa. So
fair enough. Well, the rating system we use, appearance really should only account for 6% of your total grade on the beer. Mm-hmm. So the next category will be smell, will be 24%. So as you can tell, that's much more important. And one thing to keep in mind is smell always is part of your taste, because if you close your nose and taste, you won't taste nearly as much as if you have, the aroma present, which is why brewers use aroma hops, because that doesn't go into the flavor, it goes more into the aroma, but it is part of the entire experience of tasting the beer. So when we look at smell, we are describing any malt, hops, yeast, or other aromatics in the beer. Examples for malts, you would get sweet, roasty, smoky, toasty, nutty, chocolate, toffee, caramel, biscuit, or bread. Those are the descriptors of malts. For hops, we would get dank, resiny, herbal, perfumey, spicy, leafy, grassy, floral, piney, citrusy, grapefruit, and citrus rinds. Alcohol, some beers, especially your stronger ones, you can taste the alcohol, and those would be described as boozy. You can also get a spicy or a peppery descriptor on the alcohol of the beer. Yeast also creates aromas. Ales can be fruity or flowery esters, spicy or peppery phenols. Lagers can be clean, allowing the malt and hop subtleties to pull through. And wild yeast or bacteria can yield aromas of funk, barnyard, horse blanket, medicinal, Band-Aids, diapers. Can't wait to try that diaper beer, can you?
I'm a pizza guy. You ain't got to tell me what yeast smells like.
We actually had a tasting party the other night where there was one beer that tasted exactly like Band-Aids. And I had to look up online it was some kind of chlorophenol. It can actually be derived from chlorine in the water you use to brew. Not to say that was what it was. It could have been from the wild yeast. But anyway, some pro tips when taking into account the smell. 90 to 95% of what you experience is through your sense of smell. Remember at the beginning I mentioned how important smell is to your taste. Breathe through your nose, then with your mouth open, and finally through your mouth only. The nose and mouth are connected in the experience. This process is called olfaction. So breathe through your nose, then with your mouth open, and finally through your mouth only. And that'll kind of show you just how important that sense of smell is. And agitate your beer by gently swirling it in the glass. This will pull out the aromas and the slight nuances in the fragrance, loosen and stimulate carbonation, and test the head retention. So I'd like you to smell the beer and take a look at all those descriptors and let me know if you see any that you identify with.
What I'm getting, I'm definitely goes in the hops category. I'm definitely getting the floral.
Yeah, you got dank, resiny, herbal, perfumey, spicy, leafy, grassy, floral, piney, citrusy, grapefruit, and citrus rinds.
Yeah, getting a little bit of floral. And maybe too tiny bit of sweet, which is up in the malt category.
Yep. And I take it you don't really taste any of the alcohol in this?
No, not really.
That would be expected with the pale ale because it's not a strong beer.
More the yeast than if we're going to be anything related to alcohol.
Okay.
It's a 5% ABV.
Yeah, so this is not a very strong beer, so you wouldn't expect any boozy. But when you get up into like these 8, 9, 10%ers, that's when you get some of that. So we'll move to the next category. Now we can taste the beer, so everybody take a sip. Happy to do so because Pete poured me a large portion. So I might take 3 sips. Best usually I should have pointed this out with the smell, and someone taught me this. They say to always take abrupt, short sniffs when you're accessing it, instead of a long, drawn-out one. Do several short sniffs. So I have to credit Annette May for that, local Cicerone who teaches classes on beer. One of the most knowledgeable beer people I've ever met. So Annette, if you listen to our podcast, cheers. This is to you. So now we're tasting the beer. We're going to describe any malt, hops, fermentation byproducts, balance, finish, or aftertaste, and other flavor characteristics. Examples: flavor descriptions will often be similar to smell, which is expected. Obviously, if it smells like something, it's probably going to taste like it as well. How well does it fit the style guidelines? Is it balanced, or was there a specific dominating ingredient or flavor? Now, we're talking about balance. Balance is like if it's really malty and no hops, it would be not balanced. And if it was really hoppy and no malt, it's probably not balanced. And you can just tell. I mean, if something works, like I always say, it's like it's in concert if it's balanced, which means everything flows together in a very positive way. If you're tasting 2 different things that don't go together, then it's not balanced. So, pro tips: do any of the flavors remind you of a specific food or thing? If so, note it. Sip, let it warm and wander on the palate, swallow, and then breathe out. This process of exhaling is called retroolfaction and will release retained stimulations at the mucus and mouthfeel level, but at a higher temperature. The nuances will often be the same as those detected during olfaction, but sometimes different and complementary. Very technical talk here. Really cold beer tends to mask flavors. Try tasting the beer after it warms up a bit, which will allow more flavors to emerge and become more pronounced. It's no secret that cold numbs the taste buds and is not good for your taste experience. So, we'll go back to you, Chris. Comments on the taste. Anything that specific food or thing that this reminds you of?
I mean, I definitely got maybe some herbal on the taste there, in addition to everything else. Maybe in the leafy or grassy. This is what I picked up on with the exhaling. After I swallowed. Yeah, that's as far as anything additional that I noticed. That's more of what I picked up on in the taste.
And that would be expected because those are some of the things that you said about the smell. And as you would guess, oftentimes it says flavor descriptions will often be similar to smell, which is expected. You're getting leafy, floral flavors in this. Yes. And mouthfeel is, I might add that when you grade a beer, taste is 40% of the grade, so almost half. So obviously it's going to be the most important things, because you could probably, if it doesn't smell good but it tastes great, you could probably overlook that. Although that probably seldom ever happens. If it looks not that good, but it tastes great, you only penalize it 6% because appearance is very low. The next category is 10%, and that's mouthfeel or feel. And the mouthfeel is simply you describe the beer's body, carbonation, warmth, creaminess, astringency, and other palate sensations. Examples of descriptors for mouthfeel are flat, seltzer-like, crisp, or overcarbonated. Heavy, chewy, oily, thin, watery, smooth, raw, or coarse. Pro tips: take another sip and let it wander, focusing on the beer's texture on your palate. So you need to take a sip and with all these things in mind. So you're looking at the level of carbonation, the body of the beer, warmth, creaminess, astringency, and other palate sensation. Any comments?
I'm getting kind of like a medium crisp kind of feel. If that makes sense to anybody. I don't want to say it's thin. It's definitely somewhere. It's not thin, but it's not heavy.
Yep. It's moderately carbonated. It's not flat, but it's not very lively either. So you're right. You're spot on. The last category is basically a summary of all those combined. It's overall, and that's 20% of your grade, and it simply describes your overall impression of the beer. Examples are: how was the overall drinking experience? What did you find pleasurable or objectionable about it? Offer suggestions for improvement, and be honest and constructive. So what are your final thoughts on the overall score of this beer?
Honestly, it's all right. I really didn't. It's better than the Goose Island, I can tell you that. It seems to be more in line with the other 2 examples we tried tonight of the American Pale Ale.
Okay, I would agree. This is Deschutes Beer Pond? Mirror Pond. And I discovered this on the West Coast. It just came to Michigan this year, the Deschutes beers. I remember this as being one of my favorite pales. I would agree. It's different than Dale's Pale Ale. It's not nearly as hoppy. It's kind of a more reserved. I'm going to go through the categories very briefly. The appearance, it's definitely clear. It's golden to amber, a little bit dark golden. For the smell again, I'm getting some floral, again, floral leafy, similar to what you said. It's hoppy, but it's not. It's more of a fruity hop than a really pungent hop. It's not a dank hop at all. So it's actually more of an earthy hop. That was the word I was looking for. Similar to the taste, I think it's a very solid, easy to drink beer. I don't think it has nearly as much flavor as the Dales. I keep going back to the Dales. I think it's a little bit. It's quite a bit different than the Sierra Nevada. I think the Sierra Nevada has a little more flavor as well. So it probably falls in between 312 and the Sierra Nevada on the scale of amount of flavor. But overall, I mean, I lived in a warm climate in Las Vegas, and I enjoyed it there. So I guess it falls somewhere between a lawnmower beer and a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. I think it's a great beer. My overall impression, the mouthfeel, again, it's light to moderate carbonation. Nothing wrong with it. So overall, I would give it a B. It's good beer. It's not a great beer. It's a good beer. It's I think the brewers probably accomplished what they wanted with this. It's a pale ale. It's supposed to not blow you away, and it doesn't. So, any other comments from the other beer?
I'm right there with you, JR. I'm on the same wavelength. Same characteristics that you described without elaborating. It is purely Cascade hops, single hop, but a number of different malts. So nothing objectionable about this beer in my book. I drink it just as much as I drink a Sierra Nevada or a Dales or the 312, and I'm with you where it stands in between there. So,
well, we still have a little bit left before we move on to our next beer, Pete. I'd like you to. There's some other considerations to take into account when you are scoring a beer, and some of these are pretty important. So I'd like Pete to cover some of these. So go ahead and run over this section.
Sure thing, JR. And again, we've covered some of this throughout our reviews tonight, so you might find some of this repetitive. But first and foremost, respect the beer and respect the brewers. JR had mentioned in one of the tastings tonight, behind each beer is a person with feelings and pride. There's a brewer there behind that beer. And they brewed it for a reason, and they put some passion into it and some creativity. And as a brewer myself, this is my hobby. This is what makes me happy, and some people devote their life to it. So respect the beer, respect the brewer. Even if you don't like the beer, at least have some respect and be constructive if you're going to be having some criticism about the beer. Politeness goes a long way. Now also, if you're scoring a beer with all ones on the scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being low, or if you're scoring it all 10s or 9s, that it's perfect. That's kind of a rare occurrence, really. I mean, take some time to really give it a good review. Go through all the categories, the aroma, the appearance, the taste, mouthfeel, and your overall opinion, and find out where it really sits in the scale. I mean, if you're always coming up with all 1s or all 9s, there's probably something wrong. You got to really give it a chance. Of course, everybody's going to be able to form their own opinion, which is very respectable. You should always respect everyone's opinion. They're going to have a different experience, so make sure the opinions you express are your own, and don't allow others to influence you before you review the beer yourself. So be your own man, be your own person, be your own craft beer nut, and give it your best shot on your own. Keep the style in mind. Of course, every one of our podcasts on the Beer Nuts has been about a style so far, and so we don't expect everyone to judge like a pro, although we're trying to help educate and give you some insights into how to judge a beer. Keep the beer's style in mind when you approach each beer and be a bit more objective. Some other tips that you could use to your advantage as you learn about, judging beers, rating beers on your own. You could look at online websites like Beer Advocate and look at the beer styles. It's a good place to start to get some tips and some ideas about certain beers and compare your notes with others. Judge the beer for what it's trying to be, not what you think it should be. Don't review styles that you don't like. Your opinion is going to be tainted right from the get-go, and it's really not fair to the brewery or the brewer. A beery characteristic that you might not like could be due to style and shouldn't be deemed as a flaw. So, for instance, buttery notes or diacetyl in a Scotch ale, or sourness in a lambic, or intense smokiness in a Rauch beer. Those are typical characteristics of those styles, so they're not necessarily to be pointed out as a flaw. Check out the BJCP guidelines, or the Beer Judge Certification Program guidelines, or the Brewers Association Beer Style Guidelines, which are used by judges at homebrew and professional competitions. Now, we talk a little bit about temperature once in a while, and temperature makes a big difference in how the beer smells, how it tastes, what the mouthfeel is like. Cold temperatures, as JR mentioned previously, will numb the taste buds and mask a beer's true flavors, the aromas, and all the nuances inside that beer. Use color and alcohol content to determine the best drinking temperature. Try around 40 to 50 degrees for paler or lower alcohol beers, and 50 to 60 degrees for darker or higher alcohol beers. You'll find a change in aromas and flavors as beers change temperature. Now, of course, what you serve the beer in makes a difference as well in terms of glassware. Now, it's always important to use a clean glass, and JR had pointed this out earlier. And the type of glass will also impact your entire experience. If you have a variety of beers at a home tasting that you might be putting on, many suggest that beer should be tasted by following the old lightest to darkest method. And that generally works, but it could be not necessarily the right approach. Sure, malt flavors intensify, and oftentimes color has nothing to do with tasting beer. But color could be an indication of what you might be in for. But for the most part, with most drinkers, color is psychological. Instead, consider these two things. First, consider alcohol by volume and international bittering units. So how much alcohol the beer has and how bitter it is. Save your high alcohol and high bitterness beers towards the end so you don't ruin your palate early in the tasting. And there might be exceptions to that rule. That's not by no means a hard and fast chiseled in stone. And an exception might be you could have certain specialty ingredients that have both the distinct characteristics like smoked malt, intense fruit, or wild yeast, all of which found in lighter colored beers, and you'll want to save these for the end as well. And finally, a very important point when you're tasting beers is to cleanse your palate in between beers. It's recommended that you should have water and plain bread or crackers to cleanse the palate between your beers. Try to avoid salty and greasy foods or anything that's very overpowering of your senses. You only want to eat and scrub your palate. You don't want to destroy it. So those are some guidelines to give you some ideas on how to do a good job of checking out your beers and giving them good judgment, to keep things in mind. And so as we move on, there's some things that you probably should not do when you're judging beers. And JR, I'll let you talk about a few of those.
Okay, let's first everybody drink. I still got a little bit of that big serving, so we're going to finish that one off and get ready for the next beer. In the meantime, that was a good section because one thing I really identify with is don't rate a beer that is a style that you don't care for. You automatically have a negative connotation, and it might be brewed perfectly to the style, but you just don't care for that style, so you're going to give it a low mark, and that's totally unfair to the brewer because he's brewed it to the style. Just because you don't care for the style doesn't mean that you should knock the beer. So moving into the suggested don'ts. Don't smoke. Smoking inhibits your sense of smell and taste in a major way. First and secondhand smoking will temporarily and eventually permanently damage your senses.
Oops.
So a lot of people like to smoke cigars or other substances. Not really good if you want to have a professional palate to rate beers objectively. Don't review bad beers. If you know it's a beer that you simply don't like, but rather a beer you know to be spoiled due to reasons outside of the brewer's control. A couple weeks ago, we had a beer that was skunked, and that's not the fault of the brewery. It came out of the brewery fine. So using a review to bitch about that beer is not helping anybody. So just if you get something that's flawed, just basically throw that out as it's not a representative beer to review. Don't review from memory. You don't need to review every single beer that you drink. But if you feel compelled to, take some notes instead of attempting to recall a beer experience from days, weeks, months, or years ago. So give it another try. I mean, there might be a beer you had 2 years ago. For whatever reason, you remember, I didn't like it. Well, maybe your palate has developed. Shoot, 3 years ago, I didn't care for hoppy beers. I was kind of like where Chris was. Now I can't get enough of them. Don't review samplers or at beer fests. If you're planning on taking notes at a beer fest, don't even try. I tried to do this a couple years ago. I started taking notes, and I got about the fourth beer, and I'm like, forget this. Plus, with their small pours, sometimes just an ounce or two, loud environments, ambient smells, and you're tasting, 10, 20 beers in a short period of time. Beer fests are definitely not the ideal environment for fairly evaluating a beer. So just go to the fest and have a good time, and don't worry about it's just not the proper place to do to evaluate beers. And along the same lines as Beer Fest, many breweries bars offer 2 4-ounce samplers. You get a sampler with like 4 or 5 different types. You're not going to get to know a beer off of a little tiny sample. You need to actually sit down and drink a whole one. So don't try to review off that little sample. Don't review if your senses are shot. Flavor and aroma are intertwined. So if you're sick or your palate's wrecked from having a 110 IBU double IPA, you probably aren't going to get a very good review from that point on in the evening. Don't review while intoxicated. This is an obvious one. Your judgment will be clouded, as will your senses, and you might write something you regret. Don't be intimidated. Don't worry about it. Just have a beer and relax. We always say in the homebrew community, if something goes wrong, relax, don't worry, have a homebrew. Well, the same thing with this. I mean, we always say at the beginning of the show, we're just a bunch of guys having fun with beer. I mean, if you take this stuff too seriously and become like a total beer snob, no one's going to want to be around you. I mean, no one's expecting you to be an expert or write a novel about a beer. Leave that to the true beer snob experts, and just enjoy drinking the beer and sharing your beer experiences with people. It's got to be fun. All right, I think I've talked enough, and I'm sure we're all parched. So, Uncle Pete, if you will pour our next beer, I'd like Doug to introduce this one because it was one he picked out. So, turn it over to Doug.
All right, next up is the Bell's Midwestern Pale Ale from Bell's Brewery in Kalamazoo. I believe this beer comes in at about 5.4%. The appearance, it's definitely on the lighter side of everything we've had tonight. It's very golden color. Pours with a nice head. It dissipates slowly, leaves some nice lacing on the glass. As far as the smell, I'm getting a bit of maltiness and sort of a sweet hop smell to it. As far as the taste goes, I get a very malt forward, kind of a sweetness from the malts, blending into a lighter hop finish. I don't know the particular IBU on this, but I would judge to say it's probably between the 30 to 35% range. It seems to me the malt is more of the overriding flavor on this one. I think overall this is a pretty outstanding beer. Definitely a summertime choice. I could probably put down a few of these.
Okay, so yes, I believe it does have a very much different aroma and a different hop profile going on here. Much different than the other ones we've already had. I get a lot of malt presence on this, but I get more of a kind of an earthy, not as lively or much of a floral or citrusy hop. It's more of an earthy hop.
Definitely earthier than the others.
Yeah, earthy seems to hit the nail on the head for what the impressions I got.
Or bitter.
You know the farm on the label. That's the impression I got from the smell and the taste of this. Really, if that makes any sense to you guys, definitely. I see what you were saying with this one. When you talk about maybe kind of like the barnyard kind of thing going on.
Yeah, I mean it's a year-round beer. It does quench my thirst. It's one of those things that dries my mouth out, but it doesn't leave me, with a juiciness in my mouth. I like this kind of beer when I'm really thirsty or, I've been out working in the yard and I want to quench my thirst. But it's going to make me want to have another one.
Yeah, I don't know. My first impression was it tastes more like an English pale ale.
Right.
It's American, but it tastes more like an English. It's got that earthiness to it. Now, the barnyard would even be more of a Belgian or French interpretation, but it's different than the other ones we've tasted. I guess it's an American pale ale that leans more towards the English style. That would be my observation. Not bad, though.
Yeah, I like it. Bell's hasn't disappointed on too many occasions, actually. None that I can recall, but...
Well, you guys know me. I always like to read the labels on things, see what the marketing gurus come up with. So I'm going to read this one. It says, a blonde ale reminiscent of the golden fields at harvest, made with Michigan-grown barley and a delicious blend of pale malts, with a distinctive spicy floral aroma and taste. We invite you to read what we've sown, 5.2% by volume. So there you have it.
Cool, man. Well, what else do we have?
I don't know.
I think we've got Founders coming up, don't we?
Yes, we do.
A fan favorite.
We do, and I got to mention something before I turn this over to Pete, because Pete's going to review the beer, but the beer shop that I get a lot of our beers from, I have to give some credit, is Merchants Fine Wine in Dearborn, Michigan. And I got to give a shout out to the manager of the beer section there. His name is Chris. Chris actually recommended this beer when I told him we were doing pale ales. So I told him I'd give a shout out as the credit. He goes, "Trust me, you will want to have this in this." He spoke very highly of it, so I went with his selection. So, Chris, if you're listening, thank you. He often recommends selections for the shows when I go in, and he's been a great help to me. And runs a great shop out there. The shop actually will break 6-packs or 4-packs into singles, so enabling you to purchase singles of something maybe you don't want to buy a whole 6 of. It certainly helps us for the show when we only need 2 of each. So I'm sure there's a lot of great beer shops out there wherever you're listening from, but if you're in the Detroit area and you need a recommendation for a good shop, go see Chris at Merchant's Fine Wine.
Cheers to Chris.
Cheers to Chris, and Pete is going to walk us through Founders Mosaic Promise.
All right. I like this one a lot, so I'm glad you let me talk about it. So Founders Brewing came out with Mosaic Promise, actually, I believe in 2014, as the official beer of the Art Prize competition, which takes place once a year in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And Mosaic Promise is what they call a smash beer, or a single malt and single hop beer. So there's one kind of malt in there, one kind of grain, and one kind of hop. And it's just kind of goes to show you that there are some interesting things that brewers can do without getting too fancy and getting real crazy with recipes. And I love the label on this one. It's got a mermaid on there, it looks like, with a flowing red hair holding a bundle of grain. It's just a really attractive stained glass kind of art. I think they call it Ninkasi. It's a stained glass piece called Ninkasi. And you'll find that huge stained glass art piece right in Founders Tap Room. And Ninkasi, by the way, is the ancient Sumerian goddess of beer. I just love it that they tie all these things together. So without further ado, let's pour a little bit, take a look at it. Very light colored, golden, very crystal clear. Nice carbonation, white foamy head on it. Very clear. Probably the clearest beer I've seen tonight. And boy, the aroma just knocks you off your feet. Holy smokes. Wow, that's very pleasant. It's very perfumey, very piney in my view. Single hop, single malt, and it really stands out. Let's take a taste. Boy, not a real complex beer. I mean, hop forward, very bitter, interesting flavor. Trying to find something to describe that. It's very drying, woodsy. I get a lot of pine forest in there, resiny, very resiny, very, very interesting.
Anyone catching grapefruit?
Very drying, like grapefruit pith. Yeah, good call there, Chris. Just thinking more about this one. It's all Mosaic hop, so that's the Mosaic Promise. I don't know if I find too many beers that go heavy on the Mosaic. It's a very strong hop, as you can see. It's very much an enjoyable beer.
Well, not a fan of grapefruit. I'm going to give this another shot, though. I mean, overall, though, I'm not running away from this. I'm not scared of this beer. I am compelled to try more. I might need a couple more sips of this to sell me on it here. Just learning I'm not a fan of the bitter aftertaste.
Right.
Just definitely what you're getting at with this one.
Certainly, I think this was an experimental beer that they did. They've brought it back for a second year now. Every year they do connect a beer with the Art Prize activities going on in Grand Rapids. And I think this year, for 2015, it was a beer called Spectra Trifecta, which was a Kolsch-style beer that had lemongrass, chamomile, and ginger. This is one of their opportunities to connect with the art world, so to speak. And I think they did a good job with it. JR, what do you think?
Wow. I really enjoying this. I can't believe first of all, we talked about how the appearance sometimes leads you to believe what you're going to experience. This looks like a Bud Light. I mean, it's just right. Cold and not much going on with the appearance. It's very clear, very pure. But then you put up and you get the aroma. It's just unbelievable. I'm getting some tropical fruits, grapefruit, papaya, mango, that kind of. That's just from those Mosaic hops, but and then the taste follows right up with that. I think it's very full flavored. It's not what you would expect. It's probably the higher end of the spectrum of pale ales. It's very flavorful. A lot of the other ones were a little bit more nondescript, so it's bursting with flavor. I'm really wondering, what do we know the IBUs?
That's what I'm looking up right now.
I saw that it was 50.
This is probably pushing the guidelines.
Yeah, that's the top of the scale, right? 50.
But 50 it's 30 to 50. So we had that one that was 30 that was almost like a lawnmower beer, and this is the other end of the spectrum. I'm a big fan, and I got to thank Chris. Great choice. Chris from the Merchant's Fine Wine. Chris Cook, the manager. Thanks for the recommendation. I'm a big fan. I would give this a very high rating. It tastes very flavorful and overall quite enjoyable.
I give this one a high rating as well. And I get you've got that sort of hop in your face, very hop forward kind of beer, but then it settles down to somewhat of an earthiness. And I wonder, because we just tasted 2 Michigan beers in a row. If this mash beer was made using Michigan grain or Michigan 2-row, very much like the Bells. That's why I think we're both getting that sort of earthiness to it, or the earthiness of both of those beers.
It's got a bitter aftertaste, so it's much more hoppy than anything else we've had tonight, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely tops out on the hop scale.
But man, the aroma and the flavor I'm all in on it.
Definitely a recommended. I would recommend it to my beer drinking friends.
And frankly, I have tasted this before, and I would have not known it was classified as a pale ale. If Chris from the store hadn't pointed that out, I would have probably just assumed it was an IPA. Not true.
Well, the malt is called Golden Promise. I'm not sure if it's a Michigan grown malt.
I believe Golden Promise isn't that
is the malt
English style?
Yeah.
I think that's okay. Well, we've used it to brew before. Dugout and I have brewed with Golden Promise. I'm positive. Anybody else? Comments?
The more I drink this, the more I'm liking it.
So you're coming
That's
around.
what happens.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But I see what JR is saying is about you're expecting with the appearance. You're definitely not expecting the amount of flavor you're getting.
It masks it well.
Yeah.
Agreed. And again, what we said about don't judge on a small sample, but when you take the time to take multiple sips and swish it around all areas of your mouth and tongue and palate, that's when you maybe begin to experience a better flavor.
Actually, it says here, Golden Promise is malt from a traditional barley variety grown in Scotland.
Yep.
Produces a clear, sweet wort.
All right. I believe we have one last beer that Dugout has chosen for us to taste tonight. Are we ready to move on?
We are ready to move on.
Okay.
We have is a beer called Space Rock from Shorts Brewing up in the north of Michigan. Put out some great products. They're Michigan only, so if you're looking for them, that's the only place you're going to find them.
Well, I see this brewery an awful lot in Michigan. Like it seems to be widely distributed in Michigan.
Exactly. You can go anywhere in Michigan and find it. You're going to be hard-pressed to find it in Chicago or Minneapolis or Indiana, for that matter.
Where are they out of? What city?
Bel Air.
Bel Air.
Closest Michigan city we would all know?
Traverse City.
Traverse City.
All right, up north.
Yeah.
There we all right.
And I always like to say Shorts is Stroh's spelled backwards.
Uh-huh.
Pete never misses an opportunity to mention Stroh's.
So I can't read the print on the bottle just because it's sort of dark in here, and I have my older glasses on me.
Right.
I don't know if anybody can read that.
I can read
print
it. It
as far
says
as what's in it.
American Pale Ale hopped with some tasty little nuggets of alien technology.
Isn't there smaller print below that?
Crafted to remove gluten. This product was fermented from grains containing gluten. The gluten content of the product cannot be verified, and the product may contain gluten.
Well, the appearance is definitely a very golden color. It's got a nice head on it that dissipates slowly. As far as the taste or the smell goes, definitely getting some floral notes off the nose on it. And then I go to the taste, and I get the hop slap in your face. I don't know what the IBU is on this one, but it's bitter. It's what I would like affectionately know some pale ales as is not balanced. It's quite hoppy for the style. As far as the mouthfeel, it's sort of a thin to medium. You don't expect anything more than that with a pale ale in general. And then the overall this is a hopheads kind of pale ale. I mean, if you like hops, this is what you got going. And, it's got a little bit of twist to it, saying that a lot of gluten's been removed. So if that's an issue for you, this might be a beer worth checking out.
I think they use what they call Clarex to remove chill haze, and that's supposed to also remove gluten.
Yeah, definitely a lot of hops hitting you right in the mouth.
Yeah, Chris, I was really curious to see how you would take this one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my palate is refining a tiny bit as we go on here. I'm not running away from this beer anymore. It may not be on my list of favorites tonight, but I mean, definitely have a little bit more appreciation for the flavor than I did before.
Well, we had gone over some comments earlier about how to taste, and one of them was not to be skewed by previous experiences. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time I had this beer, I couldn't stand it, and I said I'd never buy it again, but I'm keeping an open mind, and it's much better than I remember it. I'm kind of with you, Chris. I think we've tasted a lot of better things tonight. It's much better than, when I saw we were tasting this, I'm like, I really don't like that. But so it is true to keep an open mind. It's definitely, I think Doug said it's not as balanced as some of the other beers. It's just, it's all hops, but it's, like last beer was very hoppy too, but it was a much more enjoyable hop for me. This is not a hop variety that appeals that much to me. But then again, I'd much rather have this than a 6-pack of Yellow Agent Lager. So it's now back in my, good graces. But compared to a lot of the other ones we've had tonight, it would probably be, not as desirable.
Pretty citrusy, kind of acidic in my view, and lingering bitterness. So,
but I am a big Shorts fan. One of the things about Shorts is, they're only in Michigan, but every couple of weeks there's always a new Shorts beer out. I mean, they must have
dozens,
probably
hundreds,
at least 40, 50 beers a year. If you go to the brewery, they've got more. I remember, I don't know if it was you, Pete. I told somebody I was going to Shorts one day when I was on the road. Somebody said, make sure you ask for bloody beer. Is that you?
I have not had that one.
Okay, well, somebody, I can't remember who, said, hey, go to Shorts, ask if they have bloody beer. As a tomato-based beer that tastes like a Bloody Mary. And sure enough, they had it when I was there, and it was fantastic. Of course, you can only get it at the brewery, at the tap room there, and I really enjoyed it. So if you are in Michigan, make it a point to seek out whatever the latest Shorts release is. Generally, the stores get a couple cases of it, and when it sells out, they move on to the next one, but go to any good reputable beer store like Merchants, and you'll always find the latest Shorts variety, and they make a wide variety of very good beers.
And the brew pub's a phenomenal experience too, and it's so beautiful up there, and it's in a cool little town, and it's just a really nice place to sit and have a beer or 3 or 4, and a nice meal.
Is it by those birch forests?
Yeah. It's closer to the birch forest than Kalamazoo was.
I was wondering where those birch forests are. So.
We'll have to ask the California guy where those birch forests are. He's the only one that seems to know where they are in Michigan. Well, we're in the home stretch here. Let's quickly summarize with our beers of the week and our brewery of the week. Chris, we're going to lead off with you.
All right, my beer of the week. I got it. I'm going back and forth here between the Sierra Nevada or the Founders. What was it? The
Mosaic
Promise. I think I'm not showing any bias because I'm tending to like anything I've had by Founders. I've tended to not like. So I'm going to go with Sierra Nevada just because, from what I've heard, it's the standard, it's the gold standard. It started the style, so to speak. So my vote's going to go with that since the whole show is about American Pale Ales. So that's my vote.
Can't go wrong with that choice, Chris. So we have one vote for Sierra Nevada Pale Ale as our beer of the week. Uncle Pete, you want to go next?
I have to agree. I'm going to go back to, be true to my school. That's where I cut my teeth. I always go back to Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. And we're talking about American Pale Ales. Certainly, many of the beers tonight were very good. Some, to one end of the scale versus another end. But Sierra Nevada, I think, is in the bullseye of that dartboard for the style. So I'm going to stick with that one.
Alrighty, how about you, Dugout?
Well, mine essentially came down to 3 beers. the old tried and true, the Sierra Nevada, the Deschutes Mirror Pond, I thought was phenomenal, and the Mosaic Promise. And I think I'm going to eliminate the Mosaic Promise, not from the overall flavor aspect of it, but from the lack of complexity to it. It's very simple, straightforward beer. And with that same kind of formula in mind, I'm going to go over to the more complex beer. And in my mind, I thought the best one for my flavor profile was the Deschutes, the Mirror Pond Ale. I thought it was very complex. It had a nice fruitiness to it. Both of those, the Sierra and the Deschutes, were Cascade hops, which I really like a lot of. And but I think overall, I just got to give it up for Deschutes.
Okay, Dugout votes for Deschutes Mirror Pond. All great selections. So it comes down to me again. Can't go wrong with 2 votes for Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. I got to be honest, my 2 beers, I'm coming down to a photo finish between the Founders Mosaic Promise and the Dale's Pale Ale. I'm going to go with Dale's Pale Ale only because I think it's more representative of an American Pale Ale style. I really like the hop profile in it and just the overall flavor. I think it's more representative of the style than the Mosaic Promise. But it was really tough because the Mosaic Promise was so tasty. But my vote is going to go to Oscar Blues Dale's Pale Ale. So in light of that, we have 2 votes for Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, 1 for Mirror Pond, and 1 for Dale's Pale Ale. So our beer of the week, drum roll please. And this week's beer of the week for the American Pale Ales is Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. And that wraps it up for this segment of Beer Nuts, except for we still need to select our brewery of the week.
Need a brewery of the week.
So let's briefly go around the room, and we'll start with Uncle Pete.
Oh, you had to start with me. Let's see. Boy. Well, I'm going to go back to Founders. My roots are in Michigan. Really enjoyed tonight's selection and the variety of styles and beers that they bring out from Founders. That Mosaic Promise was fantastic. I always look forward to going there and trying out beers that they have, so I'm going to go with Founders.
Okay, well, I'm tired of breaking ties and being the last vote, so I'm going to vote next, and I'm going to go with Sierra Nevada because I truly think that they blazed the trail for this style. So when it comes to American Pale Ales, my brewery of the week is Sierra Nevada. Dugout.
Well, I'm going to... I have to go with Shorts. Shorts is always in my refrigerator. There's always at least 3 or 4 different kinds in my refrigerator in any given day. I buy the most volume of beer that I do buy is from Shorts. I love the fact that they come out with new beers every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. There's always a great stable of staples. And I also like their innovation. The fact that they can go into a bar and do a tap takeover with over 100 beers on draft like they did with Hopcat, I find amazing for such a small place. So that's my vote. I know they're Michigan only, but man, I love them.
Okay, 1 vote for Shorts. So, Chris, now you get to break the tie.
Okay, well.
Or not.
No, I'll be breaking the tie here. Founders continues to... The worst beer I've had from Founders, I still want to finish. That's all I'm saying so far. Everything I've had from Founders, I've been compelled to want to finish the bottle, try more from like right now when I go to any craft beer section, I'm going directly for the Founders and seeing what they have. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm trying things I haven't tried before or things we've tried on the show. I was like, yeah, that was good. So my vote, Brew of the Week, Founders.
Fair enough, and that Mosaic Promise was certainly worthy. So our brewery of the week is Founders Brewing from dear old Michigan. So pretty much wraps it up for this segment of Beer Nuts. Thanks for listening. I wanted to just add one thing. I don't know, Chris, I don't know what you do with Christopher Media, but we just launched the Beer Nuts podcast, and I don't know, my inbox is just flooded with followers, so whatever
Twitter.
you're doing, you
Twitter
must be
feed.
connected.
You mean Twitter?
Twitter, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Guess I should redo that.
Beer
Did
Nuts
anybody
Twitter.
win a glass?
Yes, we have a winner. Let me see if I can find. It was a young lady from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Her first name is Samantha, and we will be shipping her glass out shortly. And we did get one other winner that we have not notified yet. So we will be shipping 2 glasses out this week.
All right. Cheers to Samantha and the other winner.
And I would also like to add, you can go to MichiganBeerGuy.com and click on the link for Win This Glass to learn how you win that glass.
It's the same glass I drink. Well, not the same glass. That would be gross. But it's the same glass I use every show. The MichiganBeerGuy.com tulip glass. Very high quality. I'm not messing around here.
Again, we
nice
did
glass
just
for
launch
free.
at Beer Nuts Podcast on Twitter. So I will let Chris wrap up the show with all his promotional angles on where you can connect with us in social media. And
This is just the part where I say thank you for liking, sharing, following, retweeting. If you like craft beer and you like the show, tell a friend. Send the show to them. We are on iTunes. If you use Android, just go right to the site, ChristopherMedia.net. We are on Stitcher. Please, craft beer people, apparently you are very giving, you are very sharing, so help us spread the word. The audience grows and grows every week, and just we want to thank you for that. And JR, I believe you have the sign off, sir.
okay, everybody, as they say in old Mexico City, AMF.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net.
New Extra Charge Hot and Iced Coffee from Dunkin' is made with 20% extra caffeine from green coffee extract, because we could all use a little extra this year. Whether that's an extra boost, some extra boldness, or the drive to go the extra mile, we're extra ready for whatever comes our way and extra excited to take it on. Let's get it done with a medium extra charge coffee from Dunkin' for $2 with 20% more caffeine. And pair it with snackable stuffed bagel minis for an added